I thought planning my mother's 52nd birthday party would be the perfect way to show her how much I love her. After months of careful preparation and spending nearly $3,000 of my own money, I was so excited to give her the celebration she deserved. But what I did not expect was for my father to ban me from attending the very party I had organized and paid for completely. What he does not know yet is that I have already made some phone calls that are going to turn his perfect day into an absolute disaster. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more family drama stories. Trust me, you will want to see how this unfolds. My name is Allison, and at 28 years old, I have learned that being the responsible daughter in a traditional household comes with expectations that can suffocate your soul. I work as a marketing manager for a mid-sized tech company in Denver, Colorado, and I have been financially independent since I graduated college 6 years ago. My mother, Patricia, is 52 years old and teaches third grade at the local elementary school. She has always been the gentle peacemaker in our family, with a soft voice and an even softer heart that sometimes works against her when she needs to stand firm. My father, Harold, is 55 and works as a construction engineer. He has strong opinions about everything, especially about how his children should live their lives, and he has never been shy about sharing those opinions, whether you ask for them or not. Then there is my younger brother, Jason, who just turned 25 and graduated from college last year. He has been struggling to find his footing in the job market, moving from one temporary position to another while still living at home. The difference in how my father treats Jason versus how he treats me has been obvious since we were children, though it took me years to fully understand the pattern. Jason gets encouragement and financial support when he stumbles. I get lectures about being too independent and not prioritizing family values correctly. Growing up in our household meant learning early that questioning my father's authority was not welcome. When I chose to major in marketing instead of education, like my mother, Harold made his disapproval clear. When I decided to rent my own apartment instead of living at home after graduation, he called it wasteful and unnecessary. When I bought my own car with my own money, he criticized me for not consulting him first. Every milestone that should have been celebrated became an opportunity for him to remind me that I was straying too far from what he considered appropriate for a daughter. My mother always tried to smooth things over during these conflicts, but her efforts usually involved asking me to be more understanding rather than asking my father to be more supportive. I love my mother dearly, but watching her consistently choose peace over standing up for what is right has been one of the most painful parts of my relationship with my family. She means well, but her inability to confront my father's controlling behavior has enabled it to continue for decades. Jason, for his part, has learned that staying quiet and agreeing with our father is the path of least resistance. He rarely speaks up during family conflicts, and when he does, it is usually to suggest that I should compromise more. I understand that he is trying to keep the peace, but his silence during moments when I desperately need an ally has created a distance between us that I am not sure how to bridge. When I decided to organize my mother's birthday party, I genuinely thought it would be an opportunity to do something beautiful for someone I love, while maybe earning some appreciation from my father for once. I spent weeks researching venues, comparing catering options, and planning every detail to create a celebration worthy of a woman who has spent her entire adult life putting everyone else's needs before her own. I booked a private dining room at Riverside Gardens, an upscale restaurant downtown that specializes in elegant events. The venue fee was $800, but the space was perfect, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river and enough room for 30 guests. I arranged for catering that would cost $1,200, featuring my mother's favorite foods, including herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, and a selection of desserts that I knew would make her smile. I hired a professional photographer for $400 to capture every moment of the celebration because I wanted my mother to have beautiful memories she could treasure forever. The floral arrangements cost $300, and I chose white roses mixed with pale pink peonies because those were the flowers my mother carried at her wedding. I ordered a custom cake from the best bakery in town for $250, designed to look like a garden with sugar flowers that matched the real arrangements. Every decision was made with love and careful consideration for what would make my mother happiest. I had paid deposits for everything, committing nearly $3,000 of my own money to this celebration. The remaining balances would be due the week of the party, but I had budgeted carefully and was prepared to cover every expense myself. This was my gift to my mother, my way of showing her that all her years of sacrifice and love had not gone unnoticed. Initially, my father seemed pleased that someone else was handling the planning and the financial responsibility. He made a few comments about the party being fancier than necessary, but I assumed that was just his usual tendency to downplay anything that involved spending money. What I did not realize was that his apparent acceptance was actually him biding his time until he could take control of the situation entirely. The first signs of trouble appeared when I started discussing the guest list with my parents. I had assumed we would invite my mother's closest friends, her colleagues from school, and our extended family members who actually maintain relationships with her. But my father had different ideas about who should be included and who should be left out. The guest list became our first major battleground, though I did not recognize it as such at the time. I had created what I thought was a thoughtful list of 30 people who genuinely cared about my mother and would want to celebrate her special day. This included her 3 best friends from college, who she still talks to every week, several colleagues from school who she has worked with for over a decade, our Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob, who live across town, and a few neighbors who have become close friends over the years. My father looked at the list and immediately started making changes. He wanted to invite his poker buddies, none of whom have any real relationship with my mother beyond polite conversation at neighborhood barbecues. He wanted to include his supervisor from work and his wife people my mother has met maybe 3 times in her entire life. Most concerning to me, he wanted to exclude my mother's friend Sarah, who has been like a sister to her for over 20 years, because he finds Sarah's political opinions annoying. When I questioned these changes, pointing out that this was supposed to be about celebrating my mother and the people she loves, my father's response was swift and sharp. He told me that I obviously did not understand family priorities, and that his judgment about social situations was more reliable than mine. He said that, as the head of the household, he had the right to determine who would be welcome at family events, regardless of who was paying for them. I tried to explain that I wanted this party to reflect my mother's relationships and preferences, not his social networking goals. I suggested we could ask my mother directly who she would most like to have there. This suggestion made my father even angrier. He said that putting my mother in the position of choosing between his friends and hers would create unnecessary stress for her, and that a good daughter would trust her father's judgment instead of questioning it constantly. The argument escalated quickly from there. I pointed out that I was the one organizing and funding the entire event, so perhaps my input should carry some weight. My father responded by saying that just because I had money to throw around did not mean I understood how to handle family relationships appropriately. He accused me of trying to show off and make the family look bad by being too fancy and too controlling. During this conversation, my mother sat quietly at the kitchen table, occasionally making small noises of distress when our voices got louder, but never actually weighing in on the substance of our disagreement. Jason was there too, scrolling through his phone and pretending not to hear the conflict happening right next to him. Their silence felt almost as painful as my father's criticism because it meant I was facing his anger completely alone. The guest list dispute was just the beginning. Over the next week, my father found fault with nearly every aspect of the celebration I had planned. He thought the restaurant was too expensive and would make our family look pretentious. He wanted to change the menu to something more normal, like barbecue or pizza. He questioned whether we really needed a professional photographer when Jason could just take pictures with his phone. Each of these suggestions would have required me to cancel existing arrangements and forfeit deposits I had already paid, but my father seemed to think this was a reasonable expectation. When I explained the financial implications of making changes at this late stage, he dismissed my concerns and said that maybe next time I would consult with the family before making such elaborate plans. The breaking point came during a family dinner 2 weeks before the party. We were discussing final details, and I mentioned that I had confirmed all the arrangements and everything was set for a beautiful celebration. My father announced that he had been thinking about the party, and he had decided that some changes needed to be made to ensure it reflected proper family values. He informed me that he had already contacted the restaurant to inquire about moving the event to their casual dining room instead of the private space I had reserved. He said the private room was too showy and that he preferred something more modest. When I explained that this change would completely alter the atmosphere of the celebration and might not even be possible at this late date, he told me that I was being dramatic and inflexible. I tried to stay calm and explain that I had planned this party specifically to honor my mother and that every detail had been chosen with her preferences in mind. I pointed out that she loves beautiful settings and special occasions, and that the elegant atmosphere was part of my gift to her. My father's response was to lecture me about the difference between honoring someone and showing off, and to suggest that my real motivation was to impress other people rather than to celebrate my mother. The conversation devolved into a full argument about independence, respect, and family roles. My father made it clear that he believed I had become too independent for my own good, and that my success in my career had made me arrogant and disrespectful toward family authority. He said that a good daughter would have involved her parents in every step of the planning process instead of making unilateral decisions and then expecting everyone to go along with them. I defended my choices and pointed out that I had been trying to create something special for my mother, not to challenge anyone's authority. I emphasized that I was paying for everything myself and that I had assumed my financial contribution would come with some decision-making power. This comment made my father furious because he interpreted it as me trying to buy influence in the family or hold my financial contributions over everyone's head. My mother started crying and begged us to stop fighting, saying that she did not want her birthday to be the cause of family conflict. But instead of addressing my father's unreasonable demands, she asked me to please try to be more flexible and work with him to find compromises that would make everyone happy. Her response broke my heart because it made me realize that even when I was clearly in the right, I could not count on her support. Jason finally spoke up, but only to say that maybe we were all getting too worked up over a party and that we should focus on just being together as a family. His comment was intended to be peacemaking, but it completely ignored the real issues at stake and essentially sided with my father's position that my concerns were not valid. The argument ended with my father storming out of the room and my mother asking me to please think about what kind of compromises I might be willing to make. I left that dinner feeling angry, hurt, and more isolated from my family than I had ever felt before. It was becoming clear that this conflict was about much more than party planning. It was about power control and whether I would be allowed to have any agency in my own family relationships. Over the next several days, the tension in our house became unbearable. My father refused to speak to me directly, instead making comments to my mother about how disappointed he was in my attitude and how worried he was about my inability to respect family relationships. My mother started every conversation with me by asking whether I had thought any more about the compromises we had discussed, which felt like a constant pressure to give in to demands I considered unreasonable. I tried to have a calm conversation with my father about finding middle ground, but he had moved beyond negotiation. He told me that he had been doing some research about event planning and that he believed I had been taken advantage of by vendors who saw an inexperienced young woman and decided to overcharge her. He announced that he wanted to cancel all the existing arrangements and start over with vendors he trusted and a budget he considered appropriate. When I explained that canceling everything would mean losing thousands of dollars in deposits and potentially having no party at all, he said that would teach me a valuable lesson about making expensive commitments without proper consultation. He suggested that we could have a nice family dinner at home instead, which would be more meaningful anyway because it would focus on togetherness rather than showing off. I realized that my father was not actually interested in creating a better celebration for my mother. He was interested in demonstrating that he was still in control of family decisions and that my financial independence did not translate into any real power within our household dynamics. This was not about the party anymore. This was about him reasserting dominance over a daughter who had dared to act without his permission. The revelation about his true motivations filled me with a cold anger that I had never experienced before. For 28 years, I had tried to be the good daughter who worked hard, stayed out of trouble, and respected my parents. I had accepted his criticism of my choices and his dismissal of my accomplishments because I believed that family harmony was more important than standing up for myself. But watching him deliberately sabotage something I had created out of love for my mother showed me that no amount of compromise or accommodation would ever be enough. When I tried to talk to my mother privately about the situation, hoping she might help me find a way forward, her response made everything worse. She told me that she appreciated everything I was trying to do for her birthday, but that she was more concerned about the conflict in our family than about having a fancy party. She said that maybe my father was right about the celebration being too elaborate, and that perhaps we should scale things back to something that would make everyone more comfortable. I asked her directly whether she wanted the party I had planned or whether she preferred my father's alternative suggestions. She started crying and said that she just wanted her family to get along and that she would be happy with whatever we decided as long as we could all be together peacefully. Her refusal to express a preference felt like a betrayal because it essentially handed my father complete victory in our dispute. That conversation with my mother was the moment I understood that I was truly on my own in this situation. The two people who should have supported me, or at least tried to understand my perspective, had both chosen to prioritize my father's demands over my feelings and my substantial financial investment in this celebration. The final confrontation happened 3 days before the party. My father called me into the living room and announced that he had made a decision about how to handle the birthday situation. He said that after careful consideration, he had concluded that the party I had planned was not appropriate for our family and that he would not allow it to proceed as currently organized. He informed me that he had already begun contacting vendors to discuss modifications to our arrangements. He planned to move the celebration to our backyard, cancel the catering in favor of a potluck dinner, and eliminate what he called unnecessary expenses like professional photography and elaborate decorations. He presented this as a reasonable compromise that would still honor my mother while respecting family values. When I pointed out that these changes would destroy everything I had worked to create and waste most of the money I had already invested, he told me that this was the consequence of making plans without proper family input. He said that if I had consulted with him from the beginning, we could have avoided this entire situation. I made one last attempt to reason with him, explaining how important this celebration was to me, and how much I wanted to do something special for my mother. I told him that I understood his concerns about expense and showing off, but that my intentions were pure, and my love for our family was the motivation behind every decision I had made. His response was the cruelest thing he had ever said to me. He told me that my problem was that I had never learned my place in the family, and that my financial success had made me think I could buy respect and control. He said that a truly loving daughter would prioritize family harmony over personal pride, and that my unwillingness to accept his guidance proved that I cared more about being right than about what was best for everyone. When I started to argue back, He raised his voice and told me that he was finished discussing this matter. He said that the party would happen according to his specifications, or it would not happen at all, and that my choice was to accept his decision gracefully or to remove myself from the situation entirely. My mother was in the room during this conversation, and I looked at her desperately, hoping she would finally speak up and defend me, or at least ask my father to treat me with basic respect. Instead, she sat quietly with tears in her eyes, saying nothing, while her husband humiliated and threatened her daughter. That night, I lay awake thinking about the patterns that had shaped my entire life in this family. I realized that no matter what I achieved or how much I contributed, I would always be seen as someone who needed to be controlled rather than respected. My father's authority was more important to him than my feelings, my mother's happiness, or even basic fairness. The phone call that changed everything came at 7:30 in the morning, 2 days before my mother's birthday. I was getting ready for work when my father called me with what he clearly expected to be his final word on the party situation. His voice was cold and formal as he informed me that after further consideration he had decided that my presence at the celebration would be disruptive to family harmony. He told me that since I was unwilling to accept his reasonable modifications to the party plans, and since I continued to prioritize my own vision over family unity, he thought it would be best if I did not attend the birthday dinner at all. He said this decision was not about punishment, but about ensuring that my mother could enjoy her special day without the stress of ongoing family conflict. I listened in stunned silence as he explained that they would proceed with a modified version of the celebration, probably at home or at a casual restaurant, and that I was welcome to visit my mother on a different day to give her my birthday wishes privately. He presented this as a reasonable solution that would allow everyone to avoid further unpleasantness while still honoring my mother appropriately. When I finally found my voice, I asked him if my mother knew about this decision. He said that they had discussed it together and that she agreed this approach would be less stressful for everyone involved. This statement felt like a knife in my chest because it meant that my mother had participated in the decision to exclude me from her own birthday celebration. I asked to speak with my mother directly, but my father said she was still sleeping and that he was handling all the party arrangements himself now. He told me that if I truly loved my mother, I would accept this decision gracefully instead of creating more drama. He said that sometimes loving someone means stepping back when your presence is causing problems, and that this was an opportunity for me to demonstrate that kind of mature love. After hanging up the phone, I sat in my car in the parking lot of my office building for 20 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. My father had not only rejected every effort I had made to create something beautiful for my mother, but he had actually banned me from participating in her celebration at all. The party I had planned, organized, and funded was happening without me. But as the initial shock wore off, a different kind of clarity began to emerge. I started thinking about the practical realities of the situation my father had created. He had taken control of the party planning, but he had not taken control of the party funding. Every vendor, every reservation, every arrangement was still in my name and paid for with my money. My father was expecting to show up at Riverside Gardens in 2 days with his modified guest list and his scaled-back vision, but he had no idea that I was the one who had made all those arrangements possible. He thought he could exclude me from the celebration while still benefiting from all the work and money I had invested in creating it. I realized that my father had made a serious miscalculation. He had assumed that even after being banned from the party, I would passively allow my financial contributions to subsidize his version of my mother's celebration. He expected me to absorb the loss of thousands of dollars while being excluded from the event I had created. Sitting in that parking lot, I made a decision that surprised me with its clarity and certainty. If I was not welcome at my mother's birthday party, then my contributions were not welcome either. My father wanted complete control of the celebration, so he could have complete responsibility for it as well. I called in sick to work and spent the day making phone calls to every vendor involved in the party arrangements. Each conversation was surprisingly easy because I was the person who had made all the original bookings, and my name was on every contract and receipt. The restaurant manager at Riverside Gardens was confused but accommodating when I explained that we needed to cancel our reservation. Since we were canceling within 48 hours of the event, I lost my deposit, but I was able to recover the larger balance that would have been due on the day of the party. The lost deposit stung financially, but it felt like a small price to pay for the satisfaction of taking control back from my father. Canceling the catering was more complicated because they had already begun food preparation for our event. The catering manager was professional but firm about their cancellation policy, which meant I lost a significant portion of what I had already paid. However, I was still able to save several $100s that would have been due as final payment. The photographer was the most understanding of all the vendors I contacted. When I explained that there had been a family emergency and we needed to cancel, she immediately offered to reschedule for a future date at no additional charge. I thanked her but said I was not sure when we would be ready to reschedule. The florist was shocked by the last-minute cancellation, but she had not yet assembled the arrangements, so she was able to redirect the flowers to another event happening that weekend. I lost the deposit but avoided the larger balance. The most difficult conversation was with the baker who had created my mother's custom cake. The cake was already finished and decorated, and the bakery owner was clearly frustrated by the cancellation. However, she was able to sell the cake to another customer at a reduced price, which minimized my financial loss. With each phone call, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. For the first time in this entire conflict, I was the one taking action instead of reacting to my father's demands. I was making decisions based on my own judgment instead of trying to accommodate everyone else's expectations. The most satisfying part of the process was knowing that my father had no idea what was happening. He was probably spending his day feeling triumphant about having successfully taken control of the party, planning and removed the obstacle of my involvement. He had no way of knowing that his perfect celebration was disappearing one phone call at a time. I finished making cancellations by mid-afternoon and spent the rest of the day thinking about how I wanted to handle the aftermath. I could call my father immediately and let him know what I had done, which would give him time to try to make alternative arrangements. Or I could wait and let him discover the consequences of his decisions when he showed up at the restaurant on Saturday morning. I decided to wait. My father had made it clear that he wanted complete control of this situation and that my input was not welcome. I respected his wishes by allowing him to experience the full responsibility that comes with that level of control. Saturday morning arrived with unusually bright sunshine for October in Colorado. I woke up early, even though I had nowhere special to be, and made myself a leisurely breakfast while thinking about what was probably happening across town at my parents' house. I imagined my father getting dressed in his best shirt, maybe feeling pleased with himself for having handled the party situation so decisively. I pictured my mother getting ready quietly, probably still feeling sad about the family conflict, but trying to focus on celebrating her birthday. I wondered if Jason was going with them or if he had found some excuse to avoid the awkwardness. My phone started ringing at 10:15 a.m. It was my father, and his voice was tight with confusion and barely controlled anger when I answered. He told me that there seemed to be some kind of mistake with our reservation at Riverside Gardens because the staff was claiming they had no record of our party. I let him explain the entire situation before I responded. He said he had arrived at the restaurant with my mother and Jason along with the guests he had invited, only to be told by the hostess that our private dining room had been canceled 2 days earlier. He had demanded to speak with a manager who confirmed that someone named Allison had called to cancel the reservation and that they had followed proper procedure by sending a confirmation email. When he finished describing his morning, I calmly told him that there was no mistake. I explained that I had canceled the reservation along with all the other arrangements I had made for the party after he banned me from attending the celebration I had planned and funded. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted for nearly 30 seconds. When my father finally spoke, his voice was shaking with rage. He accused me of sabotaging my mother's birthday out of spite and selfishness. He said I had proven that I cared more about winning an argument than about my mother's happiness. I let him finish his accusations before I responded with a calmness that surprised me. I told him that he had wanted complete control over the party planning, and that control included responsibility for making all the arrangements and covering all the expenses. I pointed out that he had made it clear my contributions were not welcome, so I had simply honored his wishes by removing them. He demanded that I call the vendors immediately and restore all the arrangements, threatening that if I did not fix this situation right away, I would be dead to the family forever. I told him that most of the vendors had already committed to other events, and that restoring the arrangements was no longer possible, even if I wanted to do it. My mother got on the phone then, crying as she asked me how I could do something so hurtful on her birthday. Hearing the pain in her voice was the hardest part of the entire situation, but I knew I had to stay strong. I told her that I loved her deeply and that I had spent months planning a beautiful celebration to show her how much she meant to me. I explained that when Dad banned me from the party, he made it impossible for me to express my love for her in the way I had intended. I said that I could not subsidize a celebration that I was not allowed to attend, and that I hoped she would understand that this was not about hurting her, but about refusing to be treated badly by people who were supposed to love me. She asked me to please fix the situation to put the family back together and find a way to make this right. I told her that I would love to celebrate her birthday with her, but that it would have to be on terms that included basic respect for my feelings and contributions. Jason took the phone next and told me that I had gone too far this time and that I was being incredibly selfish. He said that Mom was devastated and that I needed to grow up and stop making everything about myself. His criticism stung because I had hoped that maybe this situation would help him understand the patterns of control and disrespect that had shaped our family for years. After I hung up the phone, I turned off my phone and spent the day hiking in the mountains west of Denver. The physical activity and beautiful scenery helped me process the emotional intensity of the morning, and I found myself feeling more at peace with my decisions than I had expected. I knew that the rest of my family was probably spending the day trying to salvage some kind of birthday celebration for my mother. They might go to a casual restaurant or have dinner at home, and it would probably be strained and sad instead of joyful. That outcome genuinely hurt me because I had wanted my mother's birthday to be perfect, but I also knew that the alternative would have been even worse. If I had allowed my father to take credit for a celebration I had created while excluding me from participating in it, I would have been enabling a level of disrespect that would have destroyed any possibility of a healthy relationship with my family in the future. Over the next few days, I received several angry voicemails from my father and sad pleading messages from my mother asking me to call her back. Jason sent me a series of text messages ranging from angry to disappointed to worried. I did not respond to any of them immediately because I needed time to think about how I wanted to move forward. The silence from my family was broken by a call from my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, who had been on the original guest list for the party. She told me that my mother had called her crying and had explained what happened with the canceled celebration. I expected another lecture about family loyalty and the importance of forgiveness, but instead Linda surprised me by saying that she thought I had made the right choice. She told me that she had watched my father control and criticize me for years, and that she was proud of me for finally standing up for myself. Linda said that my mother was heartbroken, but that she was also beginning to understand that the situation was more complicated than she had originally realized. She told me that Patricia was starting to question whether Harold's behavior toward me had been fair, and whether her own failure to defend me had contributed to the problem. This conversation gave me hope that maybe eventually some healing might be possible, But I also knew that any reconciliation would have to include genuine acknowledgement of the patterns that had led to this crisis, not just a desire to smooth things over and return to the old dynamics. 3 weeks after the birthday disaster, my mother called me and asked if we could meet for coffee. She sounded different somehow, quieter and more thoughtful than usual. When we met at a small cafe near my apartment, she looked older and more tired than I remembered. We sat in awkward silence for several minutes before she told me that she had been doing a lot of thinking since her birthday. She said that at first she had been angry and hurt by my actions, but that she had gradually begun to understand my perspective. She admitted that she had been wrong to support Harold's decision to ban me from the party, and that she should have fought harder for my right to attend the celebration I had created. My mother apologized for failing to stand up for me during the conflicts leading up to her birthday and for prioritizing peace over fairness. She said that she had been afraid of confronting my father because she knew it would create more tension in the house, but that she now realized her avoidance had made things worse instead of better. She told me that Harold was still angry and was refusing to admit that he had been wrong about anything. She said that their marriage was going through a difficult period because she had started questioning other situations where he had been controlling or dismissive, and he did not like having his authority challenged. Jason had also begun to change his perspective, according to my mother. He told her that he had been thinking about all the times he had stayed silent during conflicts between me and our father, and that he was starting to understand how isolated and unsupported I must have felt. He was not ready to have a direct conversation with me yet, but he had stopped defending our father's actions and was encouraging our mother to repair her relationship with me. I told my mother that I loved her and that I wanted to rebuild our relationship, but that it would have to be different from what we had before. I said that I needed her to understand that I was an adult who deserved respect and consideration, not a child who needed to be managed and controlled. She agreed, and we began the slow process of creating a new dynamic between us. We started having regular coffee dates where we could talk honestly about our feelings and experiences. She began telling me stories about her own struggles with my father's controlling behavior over the years, and I began to understand why she had found it so difficult to support me during our conflicts. My relationship with my father remained fractured. He eventually stopped actively refusing to speak to me, but our interactions became formal and distant. He never apologized for his behavior during the birthday situation, and he continued to believe that I had overreacted and treated the family badly. Jason and I slowly began to rebuild our relationship as well. He admitted that he had been wrong to stay silent during the years when I needed his support, and he committed to speaking up in future situations where he saw unfair treatment happening in our family. The most important change was in how I viewed myself and my place in the family. I stopped trying to earn approval through accommodation and started setting clear boundaries about how I was willing to be treated. It was sometimes lonely and difficult, but it was also liberating in ways I had never imagined. Looking back now, I realize that canceled party gave me something more valuable than any celebration ever could. It gave me back myself. Sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to find your worth. That birthday taught me that my love was never the problem. It was how I had been allowing others to receive it. True family does not ban you from celebrations. They celebrate you. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping peace and standing up for yourself? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. How would you have handled this situation? Please share your experiences and let me know if you think I made the right decision. Do not forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life family stories that explore the complicated dynamics we all face. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the courage to value yourself the way you deserve to be valued.